think it's important to define what we mean by trust, because these three elements is what we call the basis of trust. And we define trust as the expectation that a target agent, trustee, upon which trust is placed, will deliver on a promise and or behave according to role expectations or agreed shared norms. And here there are some elements which are important. What we mean by a target agent can be a person, but can also be an entity, a business, an institution, or a piece of technology, a platform. The delivery on a promise is a commitment. It can be a value proposition, the company purpose, and it can be explicit or implicit. And what we mean by behavior here is usually related from a systems perspective with cooperation, usually with the truster. And the expectation is also important and has to be linked to a decision, an action, as opposed to simply a hope on the truster side. And why this is relevant, because now that you establish it, there is a question of how you break what drives people to engage in those sorts of situations in an ecosystem, for instance. And then what is competence? Competence is related to, has the system really delivered on its promise to customers, partners, shareholders? Does it use metrics to constantly evaluate if it has? And competence is by far the most prevalent trust driver in the ecosystems we study. So the orchestrators should really pay attention and focus on it, how competently I'm delivering on that promise. For example, Handy, the US marketplace for residential cleaning, installation, and other services, they realize it's crucial that customers perceive the competence of its workers. So it rigorously apply several criteria to become sort of the choosing professionals for those tasks, and it takes customer satisfaction ratings very seriously. The second one, fairness, it is basically how do you feel throughout the experience of that delivery on the promise. So do partners believe that the orchestrator is treating them fairly and taking their interests above the orchestrator's interest? And again, if orchestrators don't do that, there is a backlash. And an example of that is Apple. The giant has faced a storm of protests from developers over the fees that it was charging for listing apps or App Store. And companies such as Spotify, Basecamp, Blick, Style, March, quite a few of them, recently all protested, and some filing lawsuits. And they coordinated their protests, forming a kind of coalition on app fairness. And eventually, in January 2021, recently, Apple cut the fees from 30% to 15% for small app developers that earn less than 1 million. And again, that helped a lot in terms of it helped 98% of the developers, and kind of impacted revenues of Apple only 5%. So there is an element here on how fairly you let people view in this process. And last but not least, there is transparency. In this whole process, how visible is what's going on to people? And feedback is a gift.